Hi all on YouTube. So streaming the Kingscrusher radio show to playchess.com, aka Chessbase server, and also streaming to YouTube. It's the weekly Kingscrusher radio show. So this week something very interesting has happened. We've got the FIDE World Rapid and Blitz Championships happening, and Kingscrusher radio show to play chess. Let's mute there. So the FIDE World Championship, yeah, and Magnus Carlsen did quite well in it. Let's have a look at some of his key games. So in round 3, Magnus Carlsen was playing against Francisco Vallejo Pons. Probably pronounced that wrong. Vallejo Pons. So he's been around for quite some time. Pons, I can give you a little bit of information from ChessGames.com. He's a Spanish grandmaster, and yeah, probably Wiki is your best source. Let's just look at the game. In fact, yeah, Wiki is very good for players. Yeah, I'm usually 9:05 by the way for the Kingscrusher radio show. It's to do with Holby City on TV. So without much further ado, let's go. E4 for Vallejo Pons. Magnus played classically E5, Knight F3, Knight C6, and we get a standard looking Roy Lopez. And a favourite of Magnus Carlsen is played, a favourite flavour, which is the Brer variation, and it's this move here now, 9 Knight B8, it's retreat. This is the Brer variation, and it does make me think, if it's so popular with Magnus Carlsen, it was also popular with Boris Spassky. Apparently it surged in popularity when Spassky, I believe, played it twice against Petrosian. It might be Petrosian beating him twice with it, the Brer variation. So yeah, it's remained, you know, greatly popular, this knight retreat, and there's a certain elegance to it, I think. The knight's just rerouting, it's unblocking the pawn. So we have d4, knight bd7. Black is keeping that claim on the centre, that pawn on e5. White now plays c4, so gaining some space potentially on the queen side. c6. Actually, let's put on a Kibitzer here, just in case there's some interesting stuff to explore. Knight c3. Alright, so b4. Magnus chased this knight and closed the position up now. c5 is actually really closing the position up. Rook e8. a3. White is immediately, well, this has to be dealt with. I'm not sure black wants to take here because there might be c5 here. So black tries to keep things locked down with a5. We have bishop c2. Knight f8. Yeah, and it seems a very solid closed position to have. White's got that space advantage. Let's see how the game progresses. b3. Knight g6. Knight b2. The knight's rerouting here. Bishop d7. Bishop e3. Now, one thing about this pawn structure to notice, generally speaking, all these pawns on light squares. So generally black wants to exchange off dark square bishops. This bishop's not doing much anyway, so we can exchange off for this guy. Yeah, that would be a good strategic plan. You can imagine leaving white with this bad bishop in an endgame. And these next few moves, I think, for Magnus Carlsen are around that theme. You want to exchange off the dark square bishops here. Does everyone see that immediately, the idea from the pawn structure? This is not a tactical position. Okay, I have had the benefit of seeing the game, but as a general principle, with the pawns on light squares, does everyone agree that you want to exchange dark square bishops? Is that the plan? Does anyone agree or disagree on stream or on Play Chess? Oh, is there no audio on Play Chess? I thought I'd set my audio up, by the way. How weird. Let's say to press play or something. No, someone else has got audio, so that's okay. You see, I believe that's a strategic plan. So this is not based on calculation. This is based on human pattern matching this observation, right? You can pattern match this pawn structure. You can say this is slightly bad bishop, right? The pawns are on light squares. The space advantage, the downside of the space advantage is potentially weaknesses. So we see here this move h6, and you might think something like this, yeah, later. Get rid of these bishops. So rook a2, and in fact, yeah, knight h7, queen d2, knight g5. So black is trying to get rid of those dark square bishops. And also, of course, a juicy square would be f4. Imagine white took here. You get a very juicy square on f4 for your knight. So that's not going to happen. White plays a takes b4. Magnus does play bishop takes e3. Tries to get that situation anyway. A takes b4. White has that a file for the moment. Does it mean anything? I'm not sure. It does. After knight f4, actually the evaluation is slightly in black's favour here. So we've got a juicy knight on f4 as an immediate outcome anyway. And if you look at this position already, you know, it's quite dangerous. If black's playing this, he's threatening knight takes h3 check. So white challenges that knight immediately, knight d3. And we have queen g5. But it doesn't matter here about a knight exchange. So this is the next positional consideration, that basically, why do you think it doesn't matter about knight takes f4? White plays knight takes f4, so why wouldn't it matter to get rid of this juicy knight? You've just had this juicy knight. It doesn't matter. Well, I'm going to tell you. Well, I could tell you. I don't know how to put it as a question. I'm just going to tell you. I think it's, if the queen comes here, it's very strong. Central queen on that square instead of a knight there. That's looking very nice to have a queen on e5. So Magnus is positionally somehow getting the upper hand against the 2850, not 2850, against the 2680 GM, but Magnus is 2850. I think these might be the FIDE ratings, by the way. It seems black has a very comfortable position here. This bishop's hemmed in by its own pawns. We've got a beautiful queen here. We've got this potential for f3 at the right time, which might damage the pawn structure. Okay, so it's going well here for black. Queen d1. King f8, waiting, seeing what white's doing. Bishop c8. f3, another committal decision actually, weakening some more dark squares. Well, g3 and e3. We see queen g5 now. So the queen might want to plant herself on g3. So somehow that's better than the central square, because maybe functionally it's threatening bishop takes h3 at some point, or coming in like this. It might be more tactically dangerous on g3 than e5. Queen a1. And the queen does come to g3. And we have got stuff like this on the cards now. So that was an interesting swap of position. Yeah, bishop takes h3 might be on the cards. In fact, that is actually a key threat here to parry in some way. And this next defensive move tries to handle things. Okay, Magnus plays h5 though, and he's starting to consider locking down these pawns. If he gets a pawn, you might think there's two plans here. G5 might not be so clever because of the check and the rook coming. So actually there's a different plan to lock down the pawns with h4 now. So instead of going for this, you might think the g4 break would have been something, but no, the lockdown instead for the moment. And here, white has to tread carefully. This is a continual threat in the position. The engine suggestion is actually queen a2, but actually the queen seems to neglect. I don't know. It's so easy to say this. The queen seems to neglect this tactical resource of bishop takes h3 with this queen a5. So white is very tempted, it seems, to have gone for Magnus with, say, queen c7, and that would be dangerous. At least drive the queen, but now black does strike. Yes, can you guess what black plays? So guess what black plays here. If I give you 20 seconds. I'm giving you 20 seconds for the stream delay, by the way. For those that are wondering on YouTube later, it's because this is a live stream. Okay, there's actually a duality about this pawn coming to h4. A duality, a dual purpose, sorry. It wasn't just locking down the pawns. Actually, it's a potentially dangerous passed pawn as well. So well done if you guessed this. Bishop takes h3. And it actually becomes about this as a passed pawn. So white takes this. So we're creating a dangerous passed h pawn here. But the key thing black has to consider is always things like this. So he has to be able to come back, potentially. He plays check. And now the dangerous passed pawn is only 2 steps away from queening. Only 2 steps. But Magnus has probably had to calculate this quite well. This queen c7 isn't too destructive. Queen c7, he just brings the queen back. And he's casually saying, well, this queen's only 2 steps away. What is the bishop doing? The bishop's in the way of the rook. How do we stop this pawn? So bishop c2, trying to play for rook a1, but then h2, and this is all of a sudden, it's just completely winning for black. White tries e5. If he plays rook a1, well then actually check is pretty good. Then we can like munch here, play this check, and then queen. So that doesn't really help. So we have this e5 hitting the queen, but there's a check, and yeah, white doesn't really want to go into this one again. That doesn't help. Again, that's actually a mate in 3. Again, as mentioned before. So this is horrible though. So king c1, allowing queening with check here. And now just queen h5, protecting f7. Yeah, Magnus is a queen up. Queen takes d6, check. Queen e7 is tried with a little cheapo. Ha ha, very funny. If rook takes, this wasn't played, then rook a8 check is mating. Yes, very amusing. Funny enough, Magnus Carlsen saw this possibility and took the bishop on c2 and just took the queen here. So yeah, this is pretty good. It's hopeless basically. Black's going to take the queen, take the pawn there. White just played this, I don't know, and resigned. So what do we say about this game? It seems, I don't know, there's something positionally magic about Magnus Carlsen on rapid chess. He just played this quiet Breyer variation, but it does have this deeper credibility. I think it's something worth checking out historically. In fact, on the Kingscrusher channel, we're going to have to check out this Breyer variation. There are these two classic games mentioned on Wiki about the Breyer variation. So all black seemed to do was encourage white to have a space advantage, potential weaknesses on the dark squares, a duality with the H pawn push. It wasn't just to lock down the kingside pawns. The H pawn was actually a potentially dangerous passed pawn. Remember, black's C8 bishop is always active in that pawn structure because you've got pawns on dark squares and you've got the light square bishop. So the light square bishop is always complementary to the pawns. So it's always hitting out continually at h3 anyway. But yeah, white could have played more cautiously, prudently in retrospect with queen a2 at critical moments. And if you want a quick question about that, I mean, could white have held on? According to the engine, it was kind of equal, but this is a rapid game. This position here, could white have held on? As I say, queen a2 is given as equal. But people crack up in rapid chess. Well, from my experience, people do really crack up. I don't know what you can say about this game. It's not luck. I don't know, it's consistent pressure. I don't know what to say, but I guess it was easy for even a GM on rapid chess to underestimate the H pawn and the bishop takes h3. Maybe white was encouraged having possession of the A file, but to actually make use of that A file quite quickly is a different story, isn't it? And also, you know, you've got this curiously provocative king f8, as though Magnus was kind of a bit like Carlsen. He was saying, come and get me with the A file. Yeah, I'm playing recklessly with king f8, but yeah, it's just tempting white out of his shell, and then we sack, and we have this H pawn, and then we win. It's easy when you see Magnus Carlsen play. So let's go on to another game. Okay, so let's see another game from the rapid. So I'm going to go to round 5 now. I believe this is round 5 against Dennis Wagner. So Magnus was playing whites here. So who's Dennis Wagner? Just while we're here, Dennis Wagner is a German grandmaster. He's actually 18 years old, born 1997, young one. 18-year-old GM. He became a FIDE master in 2011 and I am in 2012. So Dennis Wagner. Right, let's have a look at this. So d4. And after knight f6, yeah, Magnus has also got this statement about opening theory, it seems, that he's making in this tournament. You might notice that he'll play super dull openings with white, but although you can call them super dull, you can say that they're also latently aggressive openings. They suspend aggression until later. He plays bishop f4, so it's like we're going into the dreaded London system setup. So bishop f4, it kind of bypasses opening theory, and there's that US grandmaster that plays this all the time, the London system setups, Kamsky. So it can't be that bad, right? If Kamsky plays it all the time. So d5, we have e3, yes. c5, c3, yes. This dreaded triangle. So it's like playing a Slav defense with white, sort of, as well, one could say. Knight c6. Knight d2. The question is, what is actually wrong with the setup? The bishops are both okay. White's pawn structure is fairly solid, so it ticks a few boxes, even if it is dull, one has to say. So c takes d4 is played, and white captures with e takes d4, as though maybe, you know, maybe the e files later is good, an outpost on e5. Sometimes you notice this in games with this structure, that the structure is prone to later a minority attack. This is one big downside of this structure. It's prone later to a minority attack, where you get a minority of pawns attacking the majority, right? But apart from that, it does have advantages, this structure, for white. We have bishop f5, and that does neglect b7, that move, And actually we see queen b3 asking about b7, queen c8, slightly awkward, maybe, knight gf3, h6. And you see in this position actually that even though it seems a bit boring, white's quicker on dark square control. If you look at the dark squares in this position, this bishop on f4 is cutting across the dark squares. There's also some pressure on the queen side. White could be quicker to these outpost squares. White's quicker on the dark square pressure here, and immediately pounces on the e5 square, knight e5. It might actually be almost, no, I wouldn't say threatening anything. It just looks quite comfortable. Here, black plays a forcing move, creating some weaknesses, g5. But is black in an uncomfortable state? If he played e6, what would happen? I don't think there's anything major, apparently. There's nothing major. Maybe he could play e6. This might actually be a more solid move than what was played, which was g5. Intuitively, when we see a move like g5, we think the game's going to end in something, a win or a loss. Because there's more weaknesses. Black is taking risks to try and win the game more than e6. So anyway, the bishop drops back, bishop g7, bishop e2, both sides castle. In fact, we see e6 now, rook a e1, and the rooks look quite nice here, and he's blocked in his f rook. And I think that one reason for that might be that f4 is quite handy to have a rook behind it. He still wants to have a go at this pawn structure. Magnus might want to have a go at this pawn structure. It's tempting to play for f4 here. That is like the major idea, I think, of this position, to play for f4. Black plays knight e4 here. White takes that off. Bishop takes. And possibly black might consider knight takes here, just to get rid of this outpost piece and attack the pawn after. The knight retreats and is ready to go to c5 instead. Actually, it'll be a nuisance on c5, because you can imagine also any b6 there might be bishop a6. Just to give that as an example. Well, maybe we don't need to give that as an example actually. It's potentially useful, but was it actually played? After bishop h7, it might be tempting to play knight c5, you'd think. It wasn't actually played. No, Magnus actually plays queen d1. Queen d1. Incredible. Let's just make sure, if there's no tactical reason here, knight c5. Maybe this is possible, b6 here. Bishop a6. I'm not sure this is leading anywhere. It's not leading anywhere. It seems this is okay. Apparently this is okay. You know, this is some tactical things going on. All right. So anyway, we have this quiet retreat instead. Queen d1 helps maintain control of that d3 square. Knight e7, and now bishop e5, trying to weaken black on the dark squares. If we can get rid of that dark square bishop, or create some more weaknesses, that'll be fun. f6. So some more potential weaknesses have been created with f6. Bishop goes to d6. And this is slightly annoying now. That pin. Slightly annoying. Because if the queen comes here, the bishop can actually drop back. That's still annoying on that diagonal. In fact, we see here rook e8 being played. And now bishop h5 hitting the rook. Bishop g6. And look, you can see the purpose of this queen d1 now. Look at this. It's protecting h5. White now seems to be forcing a positional advantage with bishop takes e7. Magnus is seemingly, he's simplifying the position now. And what has he achieved? Well, this bishop doesn't seem the best bishop in the world, and there's still f4 now. As though the bishop's going to be really locked in or something, or maybe the king, even more importantly, the king's safety is compromised with f takes g. We see queen e8 trying to get the queens off. Magnus is keeping the queens on. So here, both f5 to undermine the structure here. You see that structure is quite loose potentially after f5. d5 is a danger. So black tries locking down on f5, but also fg is also interesting. I mean, f takes g. So f5 is played, but we've got this gaping hole now on e5. Look at this structure. We've got a potentially big hole problem on e5. And white actually still targets this pawn structure now by playing f takes, h takes, g4, trying to wreck this triangle and encourage this commitment to f4. So it's a very fixed pawn structure. This pair of pawns here. e5 is a horrible hole in the position. So it seems Magnus has got a nice positional advantage from a kind of nothing opening, just playing very solidly with white. And the pawn structure here is ripe for undermining with h4, which he plays h4. Trying to break the pawn structure. Queen g6. And yeah, it is tempting to play h takes g5. That is one of the top moves. Well, the engine would recommend it anyway. But maybe, yeah, Magnus actually chose instead h5. Another duality decision. This pawn, what is it doing? It's clamping down a space advantage. Rook e2. White is building up against the backward pawn. Simply king h7, and like the previous game I showed you, this king move is like a waiting move, saying to black, what is your plan? Reveal your cards, like in poker. Reveal your cards here. What are you doing here? Because I've got this big bind on the e5 square. Black's position seems miserable, very miserable. Black plays king h6, and we have this move a4 now, as though attempting to lock down these pawns in advance. Bishop f6, a5, and there might be a positional threat to deal with, like a6 here. And it seems tricky. What does black actually do in this position? So we see queen h7, and a6 is actually played. Now here, obviously it's a pawn sack. If it's taken, that's not very good. White's just going to build up on the a file, maybe rook a1, and this is already it's comfortable pressure on both a7 and e6. So black doesn't really want that. He tries to keep things simple with b6. Now knight b4 is tactically potentially threatening knight takes d5, potentially if e7 wasn't so protected. But there's also this knight c6 idea, which is annoying as well. Queen f7. Queen d3, with an idea that queen g6 at the right time to get rid of the queens, in conjunction with knight takes d5, is very useful to try and get a tactic going against e7. So there's the option here to remove tactically the defense of e7 with queen g6. For knight takes d5 to be more effective. King g7 is played, king f2, rook c8. That is one defender away from e7. So you might think, hold on a sec, does queen g6 work in this position? It doesn't actually. It wasn't played. It's not suggested by the engine or anything. Magnus just played king f3, blocking the f pawn. If he plays queen g6, black can just protect e7 against knight takes d5, and there's no problem. Apparently there's no major problem, although even here it is a little bit tricky. Maybe this is actually better for white. Actually, it's still okay here, Queen G6. But Magnus first anyway protects against any movement of this pawn with King F3. So locking down the opponent's pawn structure, like this is locked down, these two are locked down, and these are kind of locked down, is a good idea. It's standard practice. It's like standard thing to do, to lock down the opponent's pawns. You can build up and build up for the right moment to do this tactical execution of Queen G6, but because you can, maybe that moment's very committal, so it might only happen once or twice in a game. You want to maximize the position first before implementing Queen G6. Yeah, so you want to knock out the defense of E7 for this knight takes D5 to work. So King F3, I don't know how many of you would have played King F3, but it's one of those moves which just improves the position, because you can take your time over Queen G6. Does everyone agree with that? Yeah, take time over Queen G6. Yeah, everyone agree with that? You can take your time here, because black is not doing anything. This is not an open position. The rules about tempo don't really apply. It's about, you know, making sure the opponent hasn't got any counterplay and arranging, you know, this tactical breakthrough as effectively as possible. You can afford to do that here in this sort of position because black isn't doing anything. Agree? Everyone agree about that? Okay, so anyway, rook c4 is played, which really neglects e7. Really neglects e7. So that there's no rook e8 resource to defend e7. And now this is the time. This is the time to play Queen G6. E7 is very vulnerable. And with this, black is getting dismantled. Queen takes G6, H takes G. So we're immediately threatening both rook takes E6 and knight takes D5. Black has to react tactically. This is what he's perhaps calculated. Bishop takes D4. Note it's not with check because the king's not on the dark square. Rook takes E6, leaves D5 weak still. The pawn structure has been undermined, leaving D5 weak. Rook takes, rook takes. So D5 is now a major weakness. White stands significantly better here. A winning position strategically. We've also got this dangerous pawn, and can the rook and knight work together? Well, this pawn is dropping off actually. So it drops off, and immediately white is threatening to trap the rook with b3 here because this rook hasn't got anywhere to go. So rook a4, getting the rook out of jail, hitting that pawn. But a very powerful forcing move again, b4. And where is the bishop going? Can go here, can go here if you want to lose another pawn, or you can go miserably here. If it goes here, this doesn't look good after knight e7 anyway. For knight f5 check on the cards, like mating. This is like a forced mate in any case, yeah. Yeah, etc. queening. So it's not good to go to e3 or g1 because basically knight e7 to f5 check is coming. So the bishop hangs around there, but now the final move is simple and crushing. Can you see the final move at move 44? So white to play. Any ideas? Any ideas? 20 seconds. So you've got to try and finish off this position, yeah? Anyone? White to play. Alright, give yourself a few points if you see this next move. Oh, yeah, b5 seems tempting, doesn't it? Actually, there's a mention of b5. That's probably winning as well, to be honest, because it's a winning position, funny enough. But even more crushing is actually rook f6. Because it doesn't matter about this a pawn. Black actually resigned after rook f6, because the threat is here and mating if king g8. You know, if takes here, check. If the king goes back, then it's just mating 2. And if the king takes here, then we just take here, winning easily. We're going to be playing check next, winning this pawn, etc. So actually there's nothing black can do, it seems, in this position against rook f7 check. This rook is hardly in a position to do anything about rook f7. If the king steps back in advance, we just play rook f7 anyway, because we want to play knight f6 check next. Yeah. So yeah, that's it after rook takes f6. So what do we say about this game? What will you remember in a few weeks' time, or months, or whatever years? Magnus played a very boring opening with white. He avoided opening theory. The structure might be prone in theory to some sort of minority attack. That wasn't realised by black at all in this game. It seemed the early inconvenience of queen c8 really didn't help black that much. Black's g5 gave white some simple plans actually later of just making targeting a backward pawn on the e file, locking down 2 centre pawns. Magnus then locked down the 2 flank pawns. Also had a lockdown on the queen side, and just arranged a tactical breakthrough involving queen g6, because his knight was always poised for knight takes d5, so he made knight takes d5 as effective as possible for that breakthrough, that tactical breakthrough. Again, you might say, this question is posed again, could black have held on? Actually, I think it was much more unlikely for black to have held on through stubborn moves in this game, because we reach a position where there's just so much pressure and restraints. This position, I can't see how black, if black tries to keep this position, well, actually the engine gives, if black tries to do nothing, would black have survived? Let's just see the game for a bit. Hold on a sec. After the a pawn attack, I think black's position was creaking here. If black did absolutely nothing, this is an interesting theoretical question, I think. Would an engine break through here if black was able to just defend e7? Well, I think apparently h6 is dangerous anyway. So black can't afford to do nothing. Here, it gets dangerous anyway. Queen b5 for knight c6. It looks like a horrible position, basically. Yeah, maybe it was just breaking through for white anyway. The problem with this position, it's much worse than the other game. If white can actually try and win e6 by force, obviously it's losing. Okay. And there's also this added option of this pawn push here. White has actually extra pawn mobility, but the backward pawn is really fundamentally a horrible, wretched pawn on e6. Okay, let's have a look at another game. Okay, let's see the next round in round 4. So this was against Bruzon Batista 2659. So who is Lazaro Bruzon Batista, you might ask? He's a Cuban Grandmaster, 33 years old, was an IM in 1999, a GM the same year. So he got both his IM and GM title the same year. 1999 was a good year for him. So born in Cuba, has long been Cuba's number 2 player behind Linia Domingue Perez. He began to compete internationally during his teenage years, and he gained his Grandmaster title in 1999, 32 days after gaining his IM title. In 2001 he became the World Junior Champion. Blah blah blah. You can look up in Wiki for more details. Okay, so Cuban Grandmaster here, 33 years old. Let's have a look. So Magnus Carlsen plays d4, and we have knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, a bit more adventurous, as though inviting black for the Nimzo Indian. But black plays d5, c takes, e takes, bishop g5, c6. We have queen c2. Now, after queen c2, it's on the slightly provocative side, as though this might be handy. Knight a6 is actually a fairly popular move, actually. a3, knight c7, making use of that knight a6 to re-centralize the knight. e3, bishop e7, bishop d3. So if black castled here, white could just win a pawn, right? With just taking. Yeah, can't do that. So black actually played g6, and that does set up the idea potentially of, well, if you've seen, you might have seen something like this before, of exchanging off the light square bishop. You first fianchetto your knight, and you arrange bishop f5 to just extinguish this battery, right? Knight f3, knight e6, bishop h4. Now knight g7 might be plausible, actually. I mean, it's an engine suggestion, actually, knight g7, maybe to follow up with bishop f5. But actually black just more simply castled here. White castled, and it's here knight g7 was played. So clearly black can try and exchange off the light square bishops. Now, if you remember what I said in the previous game, in theory, white was prone to minority attack. But you notice black's got that same structure. It's prone to minority attack, a structural attack with b4, b5. Because if you end up isolating this pawn and making a backward pawn, you not only get a backward pawn, you get a nice outpost on c5. So actually this b4 does look as though this minority attack, or maybe build up for it, is useful. But there's another thing you can do here. It's not just about b5. What you can do is also just establish an outpost here, and if black ever takes, you get a nice square here. So there's that sort of thing going on as well. But black plays a6, and white does play knight a4, as though knight c5 is a juicy knight outpost. Bishop f5. So black goes on with that idea. Knight c5, juicy knight outpost, and causing an awkward rook move, rook a7. Okay, so black is refusing to take here. He's tolerating that knight on c5. White can also go for both plans together now with a4. So not just juicy knight, difficult to evict because things going on with a6, but also maybe now b5 is also on the cards to still create structural damage. So b5 on the cards. Black played bishop takes d3, and actually the knight took here. The knight came back here. Knight f5. Black might want to nab this bishop. The bishop takes on f6. Takes, and now we do get this classic minority attack move, b5. It's a classic against this pawn structure. The way it's played here, black doesn't seem to have too much counterplay. Sometimes in a lot of games this sort of thing doesn't work, because sometimes black's getting some sort of kingside attack or counterplay on the kingside. It doesn't seem to be as though there's any counterplay on the kingside here. So let's see what happens. C takes B, A takes. Black's trying to minimize the structural damage. A5. But white has now got this C file. This is an awkwardly placed rook. Rook FC1. Immediately it looks as though there's infiltration possibilities. But also this D5 pawn is more vulnerable. It has succeeded in isolating the D5 pawn, which makes knight F4 more effective to hit D5. B6. Queen B3 hitting that pawn. So knight F4 is on the cards. Knight E7. And even better than knight F4, another move was played, even better than this, with more prospects actually, more plan behind, more oomph in terms of planning for this knight. Can you guess what white plays in this position? So better than knight F4 is what? What would you play here with white? Anyone? No? No one's guessing it. No one's guessing it. No, no, no. Okay, so some of you are now. Knight B4, yeah. We've got this pin here, so the knight can go into C6, trying to create a dangerous passed pawn, for example. Rook A8, knight C6. So would white take with the pawn on the rook? Let's just for a moment examine that. Black played Queen D6. If black took it, the engine indicates that the pawn is the right way. The position has to be taken on its own specific merits. Sometimes it might be the case to keep the outpost, but here the passed pawn might be the more dangerous way, because immediately threatening C7 and taking a hair in this position. Queen B5. This is unpleasant, because then there's C7 and maybe Rook C6. So actually black avoids that. Queen D6. But now Magnus takes on E7 and plays Rook C6. He is going still for this pawn. He's putting pressure on both these pawns. Queen D8, holding on. G3. Interesting move, G3. It introduces some other things going on here. This structure is prone to attack with H4, H5 potentially. You know, if King G2 and Rook H1, etc. That's a plan to watch out for. King G7, H4. Rook E8. Now we see knight E5. If black tries something like H5, white can switch plan to hit the D5 pawn, it seems, with knight E5. Knight E5, we can put pressure on this guy. And this is starting to be, this scenario is very uncomfortable for black. If black has this scenario, it doesn't look very nice for black. It doesn't look very nice anyway, but black refused to play H5. He played Rook E8, knight E5, Bishop F8, but now white is free to play this move H5 as well. There's other stuff immediately threatening, well, potentially dangerous things, like even h6 looks potentially dangerous for this f7 being vulnerable, but also just hg and maybe moving the king at some point. So black's under pressure. He plays rook a7, and we do see this king g2. Yeah, it's the rooks. I mean, the rook is not doing anything on a1, so the h pawn is giving some career prospects for this rook, just to be a menace on the h file here. But also behind the scenes here, you know, knight d3 to f4 might be useful. There's other possibilities with the h file as well. Knight g4 might be useful for some sort of attack on the king. We see king g8. And it looks as though, you know, you might think, well, Magnus is a positional player. Why doesn't he just go for this plan? It seems tempting. Well, a lot of things seem tempting here. He actually played knight g4, which immediately threatens knight f6 check. That's parried. Now we see h6. If the bishop tries to keep protection of f6, this position here after f4 is very pleasant for white. Maybe knight e5 later, very pleasant. Black actually counterattacked with f5. And we see now knight h2. So offering the h pawn, that's taken. So what is this about? Wow. Really? Knight f3, bishop g7, knight e1. So the knight's still potentially heading for f4, but we've also got this idea of the rook coming to the h file as well to put some pressure down the h file. g5, knight d3. Black is trying to extinguish knight f4s. Rook f7. After rook f7, it seems as though the c file is also a good option. Rook ac1. Queen d7. And you get the idea, well, black doesn't mind this pawn set because f4, he's trying to get to the king here maybe. You know, if it takes, it would seem f4 is a little bit on the dangerous side. Magnus actually he's in no rush to take here. He plays queen d1. So he's still got this on the cards at a better moment in time. f4 is tried by black. G takes. G takes. So the queen is holding that g4 square. Whoa. Yeah. Knight takes f4. So still rook takes b6 is on the cards. Queen f5. Black's trying to get some counterplay going. Rook c7 instead, not having that pawn. Yeah. Rook takes c7. Rook takes c7. But a rook on the 7th is difficult to deal with. And you can imagine after queen f3 there might be annoying stuff coming in, like queen g3. We see bishop f8. Queen f3, very terrifying position now. Not just queen g3, but also this queen takes or knight takes. d5 is still weak. That's protected. Magnus has the luxury of switching again to this pawn. Actually, it's like torture. This game, he's switching to this pawn, or he's doing a kingside attack with queen g3. Rook d6. Rook c7. a4. Rook gets behind that. a3. And now we see this check. And now queen h3. Queen e4 check. Queen f3, the queen f5. Rook a8, tactically threatening almost threatening something, not quite, because remember any rook takes g6 is check here. We have rook f6 anyway. Queen h3, check. Yes, it seems a bit of a messy game actually, to be honest. The evaluation here from an engine perspective is just equal. It seems, objectively speaking, remember this is just a rapid game. Yeah, you don't have to worship all the moves, even if it's Magnus Carlsen. It's just rapid chess. It seems, objectively speaking, white could have played. Well, if black was a 3200 engine, he could have finished black off a long time ago with accurate play. This is all messing around. What is going on here? It's equal. The position's equal here, apparently. This is a bit of messing around that's happened. But anyway, white still has this grip on the position. He's got a nasty pin here. He's behind the dangerous pawn. So it's like white's kind of in control anyway, except that his king seems a bit awkward on g3. Yeah, rook g7 is actually a serious concern. We see queen h5, rook f5, queen h6. Okay, finally threatening something concrete. Rook takes f8. Right, king g8. Now black seems to be crumbling right now. Now finally black is crumbling. Somewhere he's just gone wrong. This pin has turned into a fatal pin through what's happened. But before we get into carry on from here, hang on, let's just take a moment here. Why did this pin become fatal? Why? Of a2? This might have been okay for black, apparently. If black's prepared to do this, apparently it's okay. It should have been equal. I don't know. That seems to be the case. But black, somehow the way he's played it, he's got into big trouble here after queen e6 check. Takes. So white is threatening now to just liquidate into a winning, more winning ending with taking and just taking this. He'll be a pawn up if he just takes and takes on a3, and this is actually what happens. Rook f6, knight takes, rook takes, and after rook takes a3, it's like a pawn up and still weak pawns for black, and black actually resigned here. Yeah, it seems as though black might have had some resources there to try and get a draw. He cracked up. This is a very bad position. This final position. Everyone agree this is totally lost? First of all, does everyone agree that this is lost for black? You don't want me to explore this, but should we just go back a little bit? You agree this is lost, correct? If you want me to show you something, we can put pressure on both pawns, I think. Start bringing the king in or something. Just play f4. We've got the king cut off, and we're going to start to make progress, I think. Say black doesn't do anything. f5. The king's just going to come in. It's completely lost, yeah. But let's go back for a moment. The king seemed awkward on g2. So at this point, apparently, yeah, black's got a2, apparently. Yeah, it's strange. He didn't play a2 just to distract the rook. What is actually going on here? What is black actually threatening? Black's threatening just to smash white up with bishop takes f4. So Magnus actually has to basically bail out with perpetual checks. I don't know what white does actually. What does white do in this position? Because the thing is, if queen c8 check, rook f8, and then what? There's a problem with f4. Yeah. It seems there was a major blunder here actually. Yeah, there was a major blunder area coming up in this game. It was this move here that doesn't help either. So apparently check this position as well might have been a bit tricky as well. I don't know. It's still, yeah, holding on to that pawn there is a bit trickier than the game. But what happened in the game here is +3 now, immediately after rook f5. Talking +3, queen h6. Yeah, this is, what does black do to defend f8? If he plays here, then there's knight g6 check. So he just forcibly went into completely lost rook and pawn ending. Okay, yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, round four. What can we say about that? Yeah, it seemed as though there was a classic minority attack, and then there was like this h pawn attack. I'm pretty sure white could have also pursued the position in many different ways here. So he played knight g4. I mean, in this continuation, there's something juicy here. Anyway, I don't want to analyse it anymore. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube on that game? All right. Let's look at another game. So, Carlsen against Gavriel. Carlsen against Gavriel. So who's Gavriel? While we're here, you're dying to know who Gavriel is, right? Let's see. Gavriel was born in Azerbaijan. He's a 29-year-old Azerbaijan Grandmaster. He got the Grandmaster title back in 2002. He was born in Moscow. In 1994 he won the European Under-10 Championship. Okay, yeah, bit of trivia there. So again, Wiki's your friend if you want to learn more about him. Okay, so d4 for Magnus. And Gavriel played knight f6, knight f3. Yes, and we get this exciting opening called the Torre attack. Yeah, and the Torre attack is a nice relative. It's a relative of the. I'm going to try and be cool about this. It's a relative of the London system. Let's be honest. The only difference, let's be honest about it, between the Torre attack and the London system is one bishop square, right? Yeah? Does anyone think of any different? Seriously. Do you think when you're playing the Torre attack you're playing something exciting? Please. Let's be honest. Yeah? We're still setting up this triangle of pawns, right? There is something though. It's funny though. It's funny that one bishop moved more is as though you're provoking black to create lots of light square weaknesses. It can have massive implications for the type of games, clearly. But it's like a London system, right? Knight bd2, d6. So I think one of its great uses is to irritate King's Indian defence players, because obviously they've got this expectation of exciting games, and the opponent plays like this. And especially if the opponent is the world champion playing like this, I don't know what you'd think with black. Oh, you just got to hold on. You can't create too many weaknesses with black. Yeah, you're desperately trying not to create weaknesses, right? I'm sorry. I'm going to start cracking up soon with these openings. They're so funny, aren't they? So h6, you see, it's already created potentially fatal light square weaknesses. Bishop h4, g5. Yes, we've got Now, yeah, black is doomed here already. You know, these light square weaknesses are going to tell. You know they're going to tell later. Yeah? Let's just face it. Bishop g3, knight h5. e4. Yeah, black gets the bishop pair as compensation. Knight takes g3. H takes g. Okay, so this structure, right, black plays c5 as though there's this idea to improve the bishop on g7. And now white doesn't necessarily want this structure. He actually leaves this pawn blunting that bishop. He plays d takes c5, so leaving this pawn to blunt that bishop. And now bishop goes to c4. Yep, queen b6. And here, yeah, you could protect the pawn, it seems, with queen c2 as well, but rook b1 was played. Bishop e6. White castles. Knight d7. Now this next move looks very, very good. Bishop d5. It carries with it an idea that knight c4 might be handy, hitting the queen. Black played now bishop g4. This might not have been the best move actually. Apparently, if black castles knight c4, queen a6, maybe black might be okay, potentially. Yeah. Anyway, he played bishop g4, and we have knight c4. And let's just have a moment to look at this. If queen a6 here, this is already dangerous for b7. Yeah. Bishop takes f7 is possible, and that's just winning for white. Actually, double check. This is really dangerous. Yeah, that's horrible for black. So yeah, black's got to be extremely careful here about how he manages things. He plays queen c7, but we get this kind of double attack, latent double attack move, right? So bishop takes f7 might actually be on the cards to bring the king out for this double check and to take this bishop here. And you might think, well, how much time has black actually got to do anything in this position? What if black played bishop takes f3? Just a what if. Actually, g takes, well, it's still unpleasant for black, this position, but that might actually be a plausible move, just taking on f3. Instead, black castled queenside, and yeah, there's a little bit of trouble for black in this position, and it's not to do with losing f7. That might not be white's best option. I think white played an even stronger idea than taking on f7. White's play here. What would you play with white? Any ideas? I don't know why I haven't been playing these London Systems and Tory attacks more often in Blitz chess on the channel. I feel really bad now. I haven't been playing more solid openings. Because I've also been wondering, what do people mean when they say about playing solidly? You see, sometimes if you want to play solidly, it starts with a solid foundation, like building a house. You know, if you build a solid foundation for a house, it would start from, in chess, the equivalent is a solid opening. So is Magnus Carlsen playing solidly, in inverted commas, because he plays very solid openings? You have to say yes from this game. It's solid. It's a solid foundation. Yeah? And here, white has a very good resource now. Knight a5. Yeah, because the queen can't take here because of queen takes b7 checkmate. Yeah, so black is committed to do something about that b7 pawn, and quickly he can't move the knight. Yeah, we're just going to take here, and yeah, it's just very pleasant. So black actually is in trouble. He's officially in trouble. He plays b6. He's in real trouble. Knight c6, and if the rook moves, then this knight is actually quite dangerous. After queen a4, this is pretty deadly stuff, because queen a6 would just win the queen. Yeah, for example, here check, we're just winning the queen. Yeah, we're just winning the queen. So black actually decides a lesser evil approach to this position, this horrible position. Now you can't move the rook. Yeah, I mean, you might think, well, hold on a sec, can you stop that? Not really. It's a horrible position. Maybe b4, and black's still getting busted up. Yeah, it's diabolical. If knight here takes, we're just crushing black on the queen side. Everything's coming down to the king. So yeah, black decides to give up the exchange with e6. This is the top engine choice as well, by the way, to defend the position. e6, give up the exchange. Knight takes d8, rook takes d8, bishop c4. So white's the exchange up now. Black took on f3 and has the idea now knight e5. So fresh thing, knight takes f3. And here actually there's two choices to defend f3. Actually bishop e2 might be playable as well. Magnus actually chose to use his king here to protect the pawn. We have h5. Okay, so white's the exchange up. White now tries to take over that d file. Rook bd1. Black avoids the exchange of rooks, and maybe wants to try and attack white in some way. Bishop e2. Okay, this doesn't seem too dangerous here because it seems pretty solid, this block around the pawns. Not too many blatant open weaknesses. h4. As though h3 might be a concern. Might be. But rook h1 sort of squashes that threat. King b8. Now we see queen c2 with the idea potentially of coming in on this d file, taking over the d file, maybe just exchanging queens. Queen c6, queen d2. Not only looking at g5, but there might also be the option of queen d6 potentially. We see g4 saving the g pawn, but losing the h pawn. Rook takes h4 is played, and here actually black resigns here. You might think, isn't black onto something with this pressure on the diagonal, right? Actually black resigned. Let's have a quick look at this final position. So only 28 moves from the Torre attack, which is a relative of the London system. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Rook takes h4. Well, let's say black takes. We can take. If black takes, the king steps out, but it's not a major inconvenience to do this. What has black got? Nothing. What has white got? White's going to be playing queen d8 soon. Black's got nothing here. The bishop's not that relevant to help the queen, yeah? If f5, yeah, white just crashes through. We can even just exchange off queens. End of game. So yeah, black doesn't seem to have anything here. Yeah, after rook takes h4, I think that was it. Move 28, rook takes h4. We can try taking here, changing the move order. I don't think it helps. Doesn't help. We arrive at the same position. Is everyone convinced black is busted? Black's just the exchange down, yeah? For nothing. Agree? Before we move on. Yeah, so what is the story here? The world champion plays the Tory attack, which is a relative of the London system. It seems giving up the bishop pair is okay. There's light square weaknesses. In particular in this game with black casting queenside, b7 was revealed as a major losing weakness. But if black... Okay, let's try and change the story just for a moment. What if black had decided... Could black have gone on the king side? If black had gone on the king side... Let's say black just castled. There's problems here. Knight takes g5. That h file is actually quite dangerous. So if takes, we play queen h5. That's really dangerous. And then it's like disaster time. Example, queen takes f7. Yeah. And if black had suspended things and say waited for white, if he castles kingside here, can he castle kingside here? Sorry. Bishop e6 castles in this position instead of knight d7 for castling queenside. Actually, it's the engine choice just to castle kingside here. And actually, it doesn't see, the engine is not very excited by either side's prospects. It's given us about equal. So somehow, it seems Gavriel Gustanov had tried to make the game very interesting by casting queenside. I mean, is that the horrible realization about this game? If black had just castled after white castled, then the h file is not so scary. Let's see, bishop d5. I don't think there's any big deal. Does anyone think there's any big deal here about the position? The engine evaluation, I assure you, is less than half a pawn. It's a bit grovelly, okay? It might be a bit grovelly. Yeah? There are some light square issues. There are. But it might actually be another case that black could try and grovel and get a draw maybe one day. Yeah? With accurate play. Very accurate play. Here's an example. Quickly. Carries on. Etc. So yeah. Okay, maybe black could have castled kingside. That's enough said about that game. Let's go to another game. Right. Okay. Carlsen against Radjabov. Oh God. You're going to love this opening, man. You're going to love this opening. Yes. So remember, Radjabov is a keen King's Indian defence player, yeah? Bear that in mind psychologically, yeah? So d4, knight f6, knight f3, g6. No. Ice cool. Sorry, I'm going to try and be ice cool about this. This is where I usually crack up when we get like an hour and a half in, yeah? I usually crack up, but we do see the move bishop f4. So funny enough, Magnus is playing the opening very simply, very solidly. As I say, I think the parallel story is, you know, if you want to build a house, you know, you build it on solid foundations, right? You don't build a house like on the sand, you know, sandcastle. So it's like a solid foundation, isn't it? Bishop f4, yeah? Bishop g7, e3, d6, h3, so the bishop is able to retreat back if needed. Castles, bishop e2. And there's nothing wrong with white's position, is there? Yeah? What's wrong with white's position? Nothing. Knight fd7. The bishop drops back to h2. And this is saying to black, you know, come and get me. You know, play e5. You know, you're going to have issues later with your pawns at some point. So black plays e5. And white doesn't even use his c-pawn here. He actually blocks in his own c-pawn with knight c3. Which creates some interesting possibilities. one thing about this, it's like a French defense structure with in the knight c6 Frenches. Black has to be careful about overextending. Very, very careful. I actually had this game. I was completely murdered by GM recently, where if you overextend like this, I mean, well, knight takes e4, but even if it was protected, you can imagine later that white could play for f3. He can hit that pawn chain at the front. That's the point of the knight c6 French defense. You can block in your c pawn, but hit the chain with f3 later, or f6 in the French. Yeah. So black has to be careful about e4 as an advance. Knight c6. White castles. Rook e8. Rook e1. a6. a4. b6. Bishop c4. Bishop b7. Bishop d5. White takes on e5. Queen e2. White enjoys a pleasant enough position. Knight c5, queen c4. Here actually there's a tactical threat of b4 winning a piece on c6. So black parries that with a5. But he loses control of b5 a bit. A knight goes in there. Knight d8. Bishop takes. Knight takes. Knight a7. Not too much going on at the moment. Black seems to have a completely fine position at the moment. Completely fine and equal. Yes, I know I'm not commenting much. I'm showing you the game for a moment. If there's any major threats, I'll point them out. The king centralizes. Alright, black is now threatening the c-pawn, funny enough. So white is preparing maybe slowly to kick this knight, maybe knight b2 first. Maybe kick the knight later. Alright, he kicks the knight here. And note also, by the way, the pawn structure is symmetrical on both sides. So that usually increases draw chances. Black plays b5 now. Now here's an exciting moment. White actually in this position actually plays b4. The move b4. You might think that's a bit curious. So tactically, if a takes, that would be very good for white. I think a takes. Well, we're on this. That's in white's advantage to do this. That would be an advantage for white. So this b4 is a bit tricky. Knight c7 is played. Yeah, and white seems to have nabbed a pawn. Bishop a3. Alright, so this is very interesting actually now here. This is an interesting moment at move 41. White nabs the pawn, but bishop a3, and this is where Magnus sacrifices the exchange actually. He plays rook takes a3, and you might think that's a bit surprising. It's an exchange sack just for one pawn. For one pawn. So knight takes a3, a6, knight d3, but there's quite a few prospects now that have been created. One prospect is simply actually trapping this knight with c4. The knight's not going to be able to retreat. And then we've got things like also supporting that passed pawn. So knight dc4, stopping c4. So is it worth the exchange sack? Bishop c5. With the pawns on a7, it's difficult to see how black actually wins that position. Rook d1 protecting the knight. So we've got this strong it seemed well protected past a pawn. Now knight b4, and it looks as though the rooks have been invited in for this check. But what about c6? Check. And is black in trouble here? There's also a7 on the cards. Black plays rook d1 check, and it seems as though white's actually getting an advantage now, because he secures the a pawn first with a7 and is now clearly threatening knight takes c6 to get 2 pawns for the exchange. Now once you start getting 2 pawns for the exchange, that starts to get a bit dangerous. It's getting a bit dangerous for black, because how is he not losing the c6 pawn here? Answers on the postcard. Black is losing the c6 pawn. So he's going 2 pawns down for the exchange. I mean, white has 2 pawns for the exchange. Actually, this might not have even... Okay, so knight takes. We have knight d6. King d3. Now apparently in this position it is a bit tricky for black. If he plays king d7, apparently he should be okay in theory. This position should be okay. But he didn't do that. He played knight c8, which might be on the passive side, after king c4. King d7, king b5. What's happening here? King c7, knight a5. So white is now threatening to queen. He's blocked that rook. Check. And yeah, black has to do something desperate now to stop this a pawn. He gives up his knight, so it's bishop and knight again to rook. And white's still an extra pawn. He's actually got this extra passed pawn here. King b5. King goes there. Okay, but what about this? Losing this one. The passed pawn is pushed. Check. c5. Yeah, if the pawn gets here, we're going to try and queen the pawn. This is the basic plan. Now, not c7 immediately here. That apparently lets black off the hook if c7 was played immediately, because apparently there's loads of checks. There's loads and loads of checks. Or here, king d7. Apparently this is no good. No, but Magnus, he actually plays a much stronger move. He doesn't allow any blockade by the king. Basically, he plays knight c4, so it's immediately terminal if rook takes h3. If rook takes, it's just a forced mate in 3 after the check. Then we're just mating, right? So that's why knight c4 is really strong for knight d6, not letting h3 go. So black has to defend with rook d3. King b5, but it seems white is just going to play now king c5 and then knight d6 anyway. f5, king c5. Yeah, knight d6 is on the cards. Rook c3, pinning. But here in this position, king d5 now. And at move 70, black Rajabov, he resigned here in this position, so probably felt this was hopeless. So again, okay, let's see what happens if black, say, takes on e4. Check. Here we've actually got, well, c7 is good enough. Just take here, it's winning. This one pawn is actually enough. It's it. That'll be winning. So yeah, king d5. And if check, nuisance check, well, we can just take this. And we've still got this knight d6 on the cards. Knight d6. Yeah, so is everyone convinced the final position is easily winning, yeah? Does anyone want to dispute that? Oh god, I can't type. Final position winning, yeah? Anyone having any dispute about the final position? But okay, so what happened in this game? It was like an interesting exchange sack for one pawn, which turned into two pawns, and then it turned into knight and bishop against rook, and with accurate play that c pawn became decisive. So, someone on the stream saying Rajabal said he thought knight c8 was clever, and he really shouldn't have played king d7. Do you remember a quick rewind to that where you say knight c8 was clever? When was knight c8 played? Don't even know when that was played. When was that played? When black played knight c8. Oh yeah, in this position apparently at move 55, as I think I might have mentioned this, king d7 is apparently this is somehow, yeah, it's equal apparently. Yeah, so the way he played it got him in trouble, got in big trouble with that a pawn. That was a bit of a grind game, wasn't it? That's not the sort of game I like to go over on YouTube generally, but I'm just being thorough here, trying to show you the decisive games, independent of how boring or long they are. Just bear that in mind. I wouldn't normally show you these games ever out of free choice, but I just wanted to be thorough about it. Okay, so let's have a look at, I don't know, we've started. Should we carry on, or should we carry on next week? Okay, who wants to make this a grueling thing? Look at the other decisive games. Okay, the question is, shall we look at the other decisive games now or next week? I think I could do it. I probably could manage it if you really want to carry on. I'm starting to burn up, of course, but if you want, I can carry on. My head's about to explode, yeah. But I can carry on if you want, okay. I think I only briefly played over them, by the way. So don't expect any major insights here. Okay, so... Alright, let's have a look at another decisive game. So this is in round 7, and is there a pronunciation thing? So who is what? Radoslaw Wojciech? I don't know, but he's Polish Grandmaster. Yeah, he's Polish Grandmaster. I did investigate how to pronounce his name. Let's not get into that. So you've got his name in front of you. I'm not saying it. Radoslaw Wojciech. I don't know. That's as close as you'll get, yeah? Let's have a look at the game, though. So d4. Magnus is playing black. He's 2734, by the way. So he's like super grandmaster level. He was Polish under 14 champion in 2001. Polish junior champion under 20. Champion in 2004 and 5. Polish champion 2005 and 14. Okay, so he's one of the strongest Polish grandmasters in the world, and yeah. Okay, so Magnus played e6 here, which you might know invites potentially a French defense, but white played c4, and actually Magnus plays f5. So they've actually got quite an exciting opening here. The Dutch defense. Yes, we've got a Dutch defense here. g3, knight f6, and we're going to go for the stone wall, and this is the safe route, it seems, to go for the stone wall. A little bit more popular than d5 is actually c6 to go for d5 later. It's slightly more popular. They're both very popular, but I don't think there's any major problem with d5 anyway. So c6, knight d2. So we've got this stone wall. My dad used to endlessly play the stone wall with white against me in blitz games. Anyway, so apparently it's a good enough opening for the world champion, the stone wall with black, at least. So knight h3 was played here. Bishop d6, queen c2, castles knight f3. So white's usual plan, stereotypically, is to exchange off the dark square bishops, try and use that hole on e5, stereotypically speaking. The knight on h3 of course supports bishop f4 quite comfortably, it would seem. After white castles knight e4, you might think, why not bishop f4 here? Is that any use? Bishop f4, maybe the bishop just drops back, you see. It's not as easy as that. Yeah, bishop just might drop back. So actually knight f4, there's an alternate plan here. Just bring both knights around to e5. So queen e7, knight d3. There's an iron grip on the e5 square. And the reason you want to keep an iron grip on the e5 square is to keep the bishop imprisoned in its own pawn structure. And you've still got the possibility of later exchanging off maybe the dark square bishops. And in fact here, after bishop d7, without the bishop able to run to e7, we see bishop f4. So it seems a slow way of doing things, but it's without bishop e7 now, running away. So white is strategically exchanging off black's dark square bishop to try and emphasize the gaping hole on e5. So in many ways, seeing Magnus Carlsen play the Dutch defence Stonewall and winning with it in many games on YouTube, actually I've got, there's at least 2. It's really shocking. He's beaten Vichy Anand with the Dutch. I think he's beaten Caruana with the Dutch defence. It's because they don't expect it. I don't know, they don't expect it. It was a favourite weapon for a long time with Mikhail Botvinnik, and I think Bronstein imitated Botvinnik and he took up the Dutch defence as well for a bit. But you might think fundamentally this is an unsound opening, you know, because of the dark square weaknesses. You know, haven't we got dark square weaknesses all over the place? But anyway, it's not as simple as that. Bishop takes d6, knight takes d6, c5, knight f7. You see, this knight is actually, with this one, could try and at least make this more comfortable, this square. Queen c3, yes, white's increasing that iron grip on e5, knight d7. a4, fixing down the a5 pawn, and it looks as though, well, maybe, you know, b4 later, and then we get pressure down the b file. But here is where, you know, black tries to generate some counterplay on the king side, and we have this move g5, so it's trying to challenge white's central control, dislodge this knight, encourage white to have a pawn on e5. Rook ab1. This peeling operation is in progress now. But g4. Now if black doesn't occupy e5, then maybe after a move like this, maybe black plays e5 and kind of liberates the position a bit. This isn't so bad, this position, especially if white took. Black's pieces then would have some decent squares and c5 is a bit loose. So actually white goes into e5 here with knight f e5, possibly to be considered as that weird looking knight h4. It stops, this knight takes f5, it stops e5. That's interesting, but who wants to put a knight on the rim like that? That's the engine choice, by the way. But anyway, the knight goes to e5. Takes. So we've got a pawn here, and we've still got, you know, potential opening of the queen side. But one significant thing as well, that white might be interested in keeping this bishop in prison by later playing something like knight f4. But Magnus actually gives up his f pawn. Just gives it up. Tactically, this isn't just about some positional sacrifice for that diagonal. It's also about this c pawn. This c pawn's under pressure here. Now, if white does g takes, then actually bishop g6 is good for black. This position is good for black because c5 is under fire. Black's going to take on d3, get rid of his bad bishop, and take on c5, and that's not so bad. So actually, white played knight takes f4 here. Knight takes c5. Queen a3, and it's still slightly better for white. b6. Sorry, not b6. Okay, to handle this pin, b6 might be an option, but actually protecting the queen is another one. Rook f7. White's technically still, you know, okay. h3. Now knight d7, inviting an exchange of queens. White rejects that. Queen c3. But isn't this pawn slightly vulnerable? These are double pawns. We have queen g5 looking at e5 now. And also potentially g takes is useful first. Knight d3, protecting. G takes. Bishop takes. So bishop takes is threatened, so that's protected. And now white finally opens up the queen side, tries to open up the queen side, b4. But what about this so-called bad bishop? It doesn't seem that bad after bishop g6. It seems quite a useful bishop. And it's actually immediately threatening bishop takes and then queen takes here to knock out e5. B takes a5 is played though. And we do have bishop takes, e takes. Now Magnus chose knight takes. If he plays queen takes, this is okay for white. Maybe prospects, good prospects. He actually played knight takes though, which might actually be stronger. Knight takes. There's a tactical idea in this position of d4 now because of this knight f3 check. So a tactical idea lurks. d4 is on the cards. White takes time out to stop that. He plays d4 himself, but all of a sudden, objectively, black is looking good now after d4 because of knight c4. Black is looking good here. There's some prospects now. The knight's still being a pest. Maybe this was a bit of a mistake for white to play d4. He's not keeping the knight out of c4. If he played something like king g2, apparently this is a small advantage for white. Technically, apparently this is a small advantage. But the way white plays it now, maybe slightly weakening. So knight c4. So knight d2 threatens clearly to fork the rooks. I know it's a bit mundane, forking the rooks, but white attends to that, it seems, with rook fe1, looking at e6. Black protects e6, and now we have f4. Queen goes to h6, looking at h3. White plays king h2. Rook g7. It seems black's pretty stable, although he's got that backward pawn. You know, the rook is defending and attacking, and potentially, you know, we could double on the G file. Rook E2. But no, Magnus can't really double on the G file in practice here because White's going to put 3 pieces on E6. I know that's pinned, but he's going to gang up on E6. So actually we see Rook G E7 and Knight D6 now, with the idea of blocking things up. Knight E4, blocking those rooks. Rook E5 is played. Rook's kicked back. Queen F6. Now we see in this position, actually it seems as though C5 might have been useful for black, but he keeps that in hand. He plays H5 with the idea of undermining this structure. Queen F3, Queen H6, King H2, King F7. Wow, King F7. It looks as though this is a bit of a danger point. What if F5? F5 wasn't played. White played King H1. If he plays F5, not such a big deal. E5, the knight is protecting black from a lot of issues. It should be okay for black. So we see King H1, Queen H8, King H2, now H4 here. G takes, Queen takes, Rook G1, Rook H8. It seems, you know, black's pieces are working well together now. This is a nasty pin. But F5, yeah, isn't the king creaking a bit on F7? Knight D6. F takes E6. It looks pretty scary actually. Double check. Apparently White's still doing well with Rook here. That looks pretty dangerous. Maybe coming down here, but he didn't actually play this. I mean, that would be seriously threatening with that pawn there. He didn't actually play this. I mean, black could play something like King D8, and it's still in White's favour apparently, this position. Yeah. So, but he didn't do that. He played actually Rook G4, Queen H6. Well, now he does it. He just inserted Rook G4. Okay, but here the E6 pawn in this particular position, the E6 pawn is taken. Rook G7. Okay, so this is scary looking. Rook F6, Queen G4, threatening a mating 2 with Queen D7 and then Queen E7 checkmate. So Magnus actually takes the queens off here, parrying that check. And we see the move A6 now. That's taken. Rook A7, not Rook A7. Rook 2 to G6. This might be a slight mistake. The correct follow-up, it seems, a more correct follow-up might be Rook A7 in this position, threatening Rook A8. And here, say like this, would guarantee probably White at least a draw, probably. But he didn't do that. He played Rook 2 to G6. And Magnus uses that pin on the bishop. He just plays Knight F5, hitting the rook. And this seems a bit problematic now. Rook C7. Rook F H4. Finally, we get really big coordination going now on the pinned piece. Black's now really doing well in the position. Check was played, which is immediately plus 10 for black. Yeah, White's collapsing. He has to find, I don't know, only moves, but I think he's worse now. He has to get rid of a pair of rooks by playing check, it seems. if he can take a pair of rooks off, well, that would be fine. This is more testing. This endgame doesn't look particularly appetizing for white. Yeah, black should be nicely placed in this endgame anyway. But yeah, white sort of accelerates things. He plays check here, accelerates his demise, because here, after king d8, he's losing a whole bishop. After takes check, check, and he's kind of getting mated by force now after rook h2 check. He's getting mated by force, unfortunately. Yeah, because if king e1, we've got rook g1 checkmate. Oh, it's rapid chess for you. If king f1, just knight e3 check first, and then we play rook g1. Yeah. Yes. The final move was at move 57, right? Rook h2 check was the final move. So white resigned. Yeah, quite a battle. But yeah, white had chances, it seems, to do a little bit better. But I guess people don't want a miserable looking endgame against Magnus. So he found a way to get mated instead. Yeah, no, it's rapid chess. It's rapid chess. But yeah, I mean, what is surprising about this game is, do we consider the Dutch Stonewall to be a solid opening? Would you say the Dutch Stonewall is a solid opening? Solid as a brick, Stonewall, is it? Because when I think about solidity, it's you know, this idea you don't want to be creating weaknesses, or you know, it has weaknesses, it has potentially bad piece, but it's not so easy, is it? It's not so easy. Black had sources of counterplay. White's c5 pawn, for example, in some of the variations when the bishop's coming to g6, is a source of counterplay. I think the f4 move was strategically important to black, to time that f4 to give black some counterplay. You know, that bishop, that light square bishop, you know, can come out at the right time. Yeah, as it did. So yeah, what a fighting! It was a fighting game, complicated fighting game. Wow. Okay, so okay, we'll carry on. Unless anyone wants to say anything else about that. Or does anyone have any question about this game that I haven't mentioned? Or should we just go on? We'll just go on, yeah. Okay, Carlsen against Ivanchuk. That's the Ivanchuk. Right. So e4 for Magnus, and we go into another very okay, we go into the Petrov defense, another very exciting opening. But there is an exciting new variation which is becoming trendy against this, which is appearing more and more in Grandmaster games. It's this variation where white tries to castle queenside. So we have this knight takes e4, knight c3. White doesn't mind the double pawns, and he potentially tries to castle queenside in this line. So we have this bishop e3 making way, you know, castling queenside. Isn't that fun? Because when you get games where the kings are on opposite sides, that sometimes creates some fun and excitement. And in terms of winning chess as well, if white wants to play for a win, this has been giving some good chances. So castles queen d2, white is castling queenside in this variation. So maybe we cannot say for sure the Petrov is one of the most boring openings known to man because of this new trendy line here. It's not that boring, is it? So knight d7, White castles queenside. C6. We have H4. D5. Bishop D3. Knight C5. And I think there isn't a fishing pole attack or anything. I mean, we could check it out because obviously some of you might have noticed I like the fishing pole stuff, but this doesn't work out here apparently. There's nothing. You see, look, black's controlling everything. It doesn't work. I mean, you can try and get this working. I don't think it's going to work. Black just plays G6. And that's the end of the attack. There's no attack. In fact, you can lose all your pieces. So yeah, the fishing pole doesn't work, just in case you're wondering. Okay, Knight C5. No, Magnus plays bishop takes C5. So he gives up his dark square bishop. Rook D E1. Queen F6. Knight D4. Enjoying a nicely perched knight. If it's taken, obviously we've got the tactic here at the end. Black's not winning a pawn or anything. Black doesn't want to undouble the pawn, so the knight's left for a moment. Bishop D7. Rook E3. Okay, Rook AE8. Rook F3. Queen E5. And here we see Bishop F5. Getting rid of black's bishop pair seems reasonable. Bishop takes, knight takes, and that knight looks kind of menacing on F5 now. Rook E6. H5. It looks as though both H6 and Queen G5 are things for black to worry about at the moment. But black plays calmly. Rook F E8. Rook D1. It would be a mistake, well, to infiltrate. I think it would be leading to big trouble on the king. Black doesn't want to play a move. Surely black doesn't want to allow a move like Queen G5. He actually plays H6. If he rushes into white's position, it's no big deal actually. It's no big deal. Apparently Queen E5 is okay. But anyway, H6 was played. Black stands okay. A3. Bishop E7. And white takes that bishop. And now we have G4. G4. B5. Rook E3. So does white want to head to an endgame with these double pawns? That's one question. In fact, we do see some simplification now. Things do come off, but black is also getting double pawns, so it's not just white with double pawns. Yes, if you remember, Ivanchuk ground down Magnus candidates. I think was that the last candidates was a long rook and pawn ending grind where Magnus eventually lost to Ivanchuk. So maybe he just wanted revenge in a long torturous rook and pawn ending. Yeah. So E5, F3, Rook F4. It looks as though no. I thought for a moment E4 might be on the cards. It might not be actually. White played Rook H1 here. So in case you're wondering, can this structure be undermined? Well, black played King H7. If he plays E4, well, just take. And king here, it's no big deal. So he plays King H7. Yeah. Okay. So black's. It looks as though, are they going to agree a draw at the moment? This is move 33. B3. And if black takes, they'll be dissolving the double pawns here. So what's happening here? Isn't this is a bit of a problem, isn't it? Because maybe white is now threatening to take and maybe use the B file potentially. but rook f4 is played, holding tight. So if b takes, we can take with the rook. Yeah, and who's having fun then? It's black is having the fun. So yeah, that's not to be taken. h6 now instead though. Here, this might not. Apparently, king h7 was worth considering. So g6 was played. We have check, and there's a problem here, slight problem. Rook h6, rook f6. But now we have that isolation issue. This pawn is going to be isolated. White takes on a4, but he's also further fragmented his own pawns a little bit. Things get quite clever now. He plays c4 to dissolve his own double pawns, but also more importantly, the king is more aggressive than the black king. The black king is stuck. Anytime king g7 is h8, the black king is stuck on h8, whilst with the c4 move, e4 is given to the white king here. Now, you might think black doesn't want to do this, and probably you'd be right. The engine's saying don't do this, don't take this pawn. The engine's saying don't take this pawn. It's saying play rook e6, and actually it gives this as equal. Are you all in shock that this position is apparently theoretically equal? In fact, it's given as 0.00 this position, and one of the reasons is like the king is not making any progress, right? There's no prospects for the king. Do you agree? Does everyone agree this position is dead equal? Agree this is dead equal? This position here, do you agree? Seriously, do you? You can't use the B file, you can't do anything here, surely. If you come out of here, this looks as though you might cause some trouble though. Well, apparently this is okay. Apparently it's just equal, right? Because there's points of attack for black. So even if you win d5 here and black wins c2, it's equal apparently, this position. It's going to be equal. With loads of checks, etc. Anyway, but after this c4, let's go back to this c4. This is a critical moment. So Ivanchuk, for some reason, plays d takes c4, and we get this king e4. We get something interesting happening. So the king's actually attacking e5 now. Check. King takes e5. Rook takes f3. Rook takes g6. King takes. Rook takes. And white is emerging with something which maybe he wouldn't have had in the other variation. Rook takes c4. Yeah, his king is more aggressive. King c5. And it's going after that pawn. That pawn is being surrounded, and Magnus is extracting a pawn up. He's blocking off the king from coming in. So something has gone wrong here. Rook c4, and white is on the verge of being a pawn up now. You see, this is what happens when you give your opponent's king too much activity. You end up losing a pawn down the line, potentially. King b5, now threatening. Rook takes a4. King b4. King b3. Rook a4. He's going to win that pawn. Finally, he's a pawn up. But you might think, well, hold on a sec. The black king is now aggressive. Even though white is a pawn up, the black king is now aggressive. So the game goes on. Okay, king f4, check. Rook d4. King b4. King c5. King d5. This might have been a slight mistake here. King f3 apparently. Apparently in this position, maybe black could have retreated the rook. I don't know. It's very complicated now. Well, black apparently this is leading to a very big advantage. This move here, King f3. A very big advantage for white. He takes on f4. Takes. If king takes, then the pawn just marches. Yeah, the pawn's just marching. It's too quick for black's g pawn. So g takes. We have g5, g6, g7, queen. White queen's first. Check. c4. Okay, so now it's all a matter of technique. White just systematically moves the c pawn, and here move 76. Ivanchuk resigned. So yeah, that was a mega exciting game, wasn't it? So clearly, in retrospect, we can say d takes c4 was causing black some issues. Eventually, it ended up being a pawn down. And then apparently there was still some good drawing prospects until he played this move, King f3 here. Apparently in this position, believe it or not, well, it's trickier. I don't know. Apparently it's trickier. These rook and pawn endings are too complicated. So let's go on to another game. Yeah. Let's go on to another game now. Yeah. Okay. I think we've only got one more game to look at, just briefly. So Magnus Carlsen is playing black against Sergei Zygalko. Now, in case you're wondering, who is Sergei Zygalko? Sergei Zygalko is from Belarus. He's 26 years old. He was an IM in 2004. He became a GM in 2007. He was the under-14 European champion in 2003, the under-18 European champion in 2006, and he's got a younger is the younger brother of GM Andrei Zygalko, who's also one of the top players in Belarus. Funny enough. Okay, so Belarus Grandmaster. So Zygalko kicks off with e4, and we have classic Roy Lopez, and yes, now here we see actually a change from the Breyer variation stuff. We see bishop b7 here. This still looks like a Breyer now after knight b8. We've kind of transposed into, well, the identification on it, the chess-based identification is a closed Roy Lopez, unusual white's 6 move. Okay, but it looks Breyer-like to me, retreating the knight. Rook e1, rook e8, knight g3, bishop f8. Now knight g5, black reacts with d5. After e takes, the idea is temporary pawn sack, knight c5. So black wants to rob white's excellent bishop and get the pawn back. White plays c4, keeping his pawn at least, losing that light square bishop. And apparently this might be one of the best ways of playing the position. Yeah, because if you try and retreat the bishop here, this should be fine for black, basically. So c4. Okay, knight takes, queen takes, and then we have this move c6, trying to blast open this diagonal. D takes, bishop takes, And tactically here, there's a little move to defend f7 as well as bishop in the form of bishop d5, defending f7, queen d1, a takes. Black definitely has visual compensation here in the form of the bishop pair for the pawn. Do you think black has good compensation? If I ask you that question, black has good compensation? I would say, yeah, black's pawn down, right? But he's got the bishop pair. Does everyone agree? Okay. So anyway, so the game continues. Knight 5 to e4. And there's a nasty pin threat here, well, potentially nasty, bishop g5, because maybe the other knight's coming to f5 with bishop e7. As an example, I think this position there's knight f5, and that's really nasty. You don't want that position. So h6 is actually played, a necessary evil to guard that g5 square. Queen f3, and now this is quite dangerous because if queen takes, we've got queen takes here. So black guards f6 resourcefully with rook a6. So he's able to recapture with the rook now, yeah? So if knight takes, which wasn't played, rook takes is nice for black. So a nice resourceful move, rook a6 against queen f8, bishop d2. Bishop drops back. And black might actually be threatening, well, to capture on e4 soon. Bishop b4. Knight d5 is played with a view of getting into that juicy f4 square. Bishop takes, rook takes. So black is threatening to go into that f4 square now, and maybe follow up with rook g6 and get some sort of crushing attack. So white tries to, well, he counterattacks now. He plays actually d4. So he's giving a pawn back, but he's making sure black is not going to have a happy time with a knight on f4. If you think this isn't necessary with white, I can try and give an example. Say here, knight f4. If you play d4 now, it's kind of dangerous. f5 actually, and we're winning a piece. Yeah, it's too dangerous to allow that stuff. So yeah, d4. This does look as though it's awkward for the queen. If f5 here, apparently white can play, can actually get away with knight takes f5. Apparently white can get away. He's got things like check. He can get away with this. That wasn't played. So we see actually e takes d4. So Magnus is equal on pawns, and the thing is, after knight f5, there's a bit of pressure on black. A bit of pressure, maybe rook ad1 coming up. But also rook ad1 immediately was also interesting. Just to try and get that pawn back. But after knight f5, we have knight e7. And with this move, rook e6 to torture the pin is on the cards. Potentially. We have rook ad1. Black takes on f5 and still plays rook e6 regardless anyway in this position. Probably, apparently knight g3 is okay for white. He didn't play this. He actually played what seems intuitively to be a slightly weakening move, f3. You see that and you think the dark squares have been weakened. And now we see d3. So is this pawn weak or strong? And he's also, Magnus is also giving up b5, of course. But after queen takes b5, bishop takes e4, black is getting the pawn back with a small advantage. Check. Not immediately queen takes e4. He's going to lose that d3. Right, he just reinforces d3, but now how does white defend the pawn? So although Magnus is a pawn down here, he's got great prospects with this passed pawn. If, for example, e5, this is really dangerous. d2 with rook c8 coming up next. It's just too dangerous. So white plays queen b4. But now, yeah, queen e3. It looks as though black's in the driving seat here. A pawn down again, but this dangerous passed pawn d2 is a menace. Surely, we have queen a5 looking at the rook. Rook d4, queen d2, queen takes e4, rook e1, queen d5. Okay, it seems to be firmly blocked at the moment. Rook e3, king h7, b4. And furthermore, it seems as though if that pawn's blocked, can't these pawns just charge forward? But queen g5, yeah, queen queen g5. Naughty. This is a naughty move, I gotta say. You might wonder what it's about. Well, potentially that forcing move is useful. Queen takes e3. The king steps towards the center just in case this pawn is about to make a run for it in an unexpected way. Now, in this position, obviously queen takes e3 is a ridiculous move, yeah, because we just take the rook. Oh, I've spoilt things anyway, haven't I? So I'm sorry about that. It's late. Rook d6 was played, yes. And what does black do? Black is actually threatening now. Queen takes e3 check with the idea of d2 queening the pawn. That is the actual threat. That is the threat in this position, which gives white a lost position. In fact, even with white's best move, he can't handle this position. White's best chance, it seems, would be to play king f2. He didn't play this. He played a4, and black simply now takes on e3 and plays d2, and this is winning for black. There's no stopping the pawn. He plays check, and after g6 just resigns. Yeah, if let's try and improve things. Rook d6. If king f2 had been played, this position, check. Here, apparently this is really bad for white anyway, because queen d4, and apparently this is losing for white. This position. If we say b5, rook e6, if we have to take that, there's queen g1 mate. So that's actually completely gone, this position for white. He's losing the rook, he can't move the rook. If he moves the king here, then there's check, winning the rook. Next, you know, take the queen. We're winning the rook next. Yeah, so it was actually this position here with the passed pawn is close to winning, but it was made absolutely winning with this queen g5. All black needs to do is prepare queen takes e3 here, which he does with this rook d6. Is everyone convinced this is completely lost for white? Are you convinced? Convinced? This is technically completely lost for white. Yeah. I don't know. It's all right. It's been a couple of hours, more than a couple of hours. So hope you got something from this broadcast. I was really only planning on covering. Honestly, I was only planning on covering 4 games and 4 games next week. So please excuse the length of this broadcast. It's been like 2.5 hours. But I hope you got something from it, from these games. What do we say about this game? It's an interesting opening Magnus plays. He temporarily sacks a pawn, gets the opponent's bishop pair. Somehow the opponent counter-sacks a pawn later to stop a knight coming to f4. Somehow Magnus goes down a pawn again, but he has this trump card, this dangerous pass pawn, which turns out to be winning. So that was that game in a nutshell. So anyway, yeah. Okay, so see you next week. Remember, 9:05 because of Holby City. Yeah, 9:05, not 9 o'clock. I might advertise it at 9 o'clock, but usually it's 9:05. Yeah, if you're not into Holby City, you know, try it. It's very dramatic. Yeah, on UK TV. Okay, so have a good week in chess. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much. See you next week. Remember to like the video. If you press like, pressing like on YouTube, appreciate it. Thanks. Oh, by the way, if you want to see the draws, here's a link to the draws. If you really want, we can go over some draws next week, but I don't usually go over the draws, so okay. Thanks very much again. See you later. See you next week.